Hey there and welcome back. In this section, we're going to be creating a reflection for all of our particles, helping the overall effect look a lot more realistic. Alright, let's get into it here. We're going back to our image. Super cool, right? I hope you guys are having fun so far. I know I am. Now, we got a real easy way to make a selection out of all of our particles because we've already done it. So, all we have to do is hold Control or Command and click right here on the layer mask. And anytime you hold Control or Command and click on either a layer or a layer mask, it turns it into a selection, which is great. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to just create a new layer. Okay, I'm going to go to Image and down to Apply Image down here. Apply Image. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take a snapshot of everything it sees in the whole image. Okay, so layer you want to be merged, and then blending we can just put to normal. That's totally cool. Okay, so it puts a snapshot of everything you see in your image and just puts it on a new layer. So let's hit OK. Alrighty. Now, since we already have the selection active, let's deselect by hitting Control or Command D. And now, if I move this layer, you can see pretty cool stuff. This is basically the particles for our image based on this layer mask. Okay, now that layer mask actually looks like it was a little bit incomplete because I painted some dark in that area, so we can use this, we can use one of these layer masks itself. Looks like all those layer masks are actually pretty similar. So, not a problem. We'll just kind of just do that again. So, actually it's super easy. So, we'll just hit, we don't need the stuff for the body. Okay, so we'll just hit Shift click on all of these. Always more than one way to do things in Photoshop. Shift click on all these, hit Control or Command J to duplicate them all, then Control or Command E to merge them all into one layer, Control or Command close bracket to move that up to the top. And there we go, that's the exact representation of the particles. Pretty neat. So we hit Control or Command T for transform, then I'm going to bring my little control ditty right here, just to the very bottom, just to right about there. That's like, you know, there's land, and then my subject, and then the reflection. So that's like the midpoint between, you know, the air and the water, right? So we're going to right click and I'm going to say flip vertical, okay, and it's going to flip it about that point. So now it's a very accurate representation of the little particles, just flipped the other way around, which is fantastic, if I may say so myself. Alright, I'm going to hit Control or Command J just to duplicate that layer so we have a backup. Okay, so you can see, obviously, it's a reflection, so it's reflecting the bottom part of our image. This top stuff doesn't even make it into the reflection. So now we got to make this look like it's part of the water, because it doesn't look like that currently. There are a few different ways to do that. Honestly, the easiest way is just with the smudge tool. So let's go to our little smudge tool over here. It looks like a, it's under your dodge tool, okay? No, it's not. Where is the smudge tool? There it is, smudge tool. I don't use this tool very often, but it's really good for this exact application. Okay, so it's under your eraser. Click there. It could look like an eye, like a water drop, or it could look like a triangle, or it could look like a finger. But just press and hold there, and you'll see blur, sharpen, and smudge. They're all built into one. Okay. I'm just going to right click and just choose a regular soft edge brush now. All right. We're just going to make our brush a little bit smaller. Now there are a couple ways you can do this. There is an option up here to sample all layers, which could be helpful. But in this case, because we have the reflection on a layer, we don't need to do that. Okay. So now you want your smudge to be about the same size as your particles, and then we'll just bring our strength up to 100. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this just to make sure, because my computer is going a little bit slow. There's a lot of particles and stuff like that that makes sense. So just save it up before you do your smudging. And basically, I'm just going to click and drag to the left and the right here, okay, just like this, and start smudging my particles. The reason I'm going left and the right is because that's what our water is doing, right? That's what our water is doing, and I want this to look like it's in the water, right? So I'm just trying to mimic this with our water. Now, you can use displacement maps and things like that for this sort of effect too, if you really wanted to. That's totally okay. And I played around with that, you know, We've got free tutorials on displacement maps. You can check them out here on Phlearn.com or on YouTube. But honestly, I like this smudge technique a little bit better because you kind of just see what you get and get a little bit more control. I think it looks plenty good. So if you're into displacement maps or want to learn how to do that sort of thing, just type in displacement maps to the search tool on Phlearn, because we have plenty of tutorials on displacement maps. And while that is super cool for a water like ripple effect, I think the smudge tool is actually right on. I think it's the way to go. So here we go, just smudging and smudging and smudging. Now, some of this you might be able to see we have highlight and shadow in some of these little particles. Like you can see actually some of the highlights, especially down here. The reflection's not really going to have that stuff, so we'll need to remove the highlights from the reflections. Alright, so you can see my brush isn't too large. If I'd use a larger brush, it's just gonna, here we go. It's just gonna, see if my brush is really large, then I get something like that. And that's not really gonna look like it's interacting with these little waves, right? So I'm just going back and forth, because that's kind of like, you know, that's what we need to do to make it look like it's being reflected in this water. Pretty neat, huh? The smudge tool, a lot of people use the smudge tool, well, not so much these days, because retouching has come a long way, but in the early days, people would use the smudge tool quite frequently for retouching. And I've always shied away from the smudge tool because it smudges. You lose detail when you smudge. Like you can see everything's getting softer, and especially if you were to use this on skin, like yeah, you could get rid of a skin blemish, you know, with the smudge tool, but at the same time you'd be losing detail. You know, you'd be like deleting skin texture in that case, and that's just kind of, when it comes to retouching, that's like the biggest no-no there is. You know, don't get rid of skin texture. See, I can change the angle of my brush here a little bit as the water ripples start to change a little, and you know, have that more accurately be reflected in the reflection. Hey, would you look at that? Two variations of the same word in the same sentence. There's a name for that. Like a homonym or something. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a literary major. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Homonym. Remember from Austin Powers? I appreciate the caliber. He was talking about the guns on the fembots, and also the quality of the workmanship that went into making the fembots. Caliber. Homonym. Anyway, I could be using that word wrong because there are a couple different words that kind of are similar. And I don't know the difference between them. There we go. But I do know how to smudge some little particles in a way to where it looks like a reflection in the water. This is pretty cool, huh? So basically just duplicated the particles, and now we just smudgeroo left and right, left and right. That one I don't even think should be there because it's on a highlight of the water. If you want to get real technical, and you can just make a large brush and just smudge it away. There we go. And yeah, now that we're talking about highlights of water, let's just make that invisible. I'm going to create a new layer. We're going to go to select and then down to color range. Hello, and let's select a highlight of the water. I can't really see what I'm doing, so let's just go to quick mask here. There we go. That's a highlight of the water. We'll bring our fuzziness down. So that's a highlight of the water we selected, okay? Now, let's hit OK. So we selected the highlight of the water. Pretty cool. Now what we're going to do is apply image like we did earlier. So we're going to go to image and down to apply image. Bam. Merged and normal. Sounds good. Hit OK. And then Control-Command D for deselect. So what that did basically is just took the highlights of the water. I can move this around now and put it over top of everything. Okay, that's just the highlights. I think my selection was a little bit, I selected too much. So let's hit undo a couple times. There we go. Go to select and then down to color range once more, and I'm going to bring my fuzziness down. You can convert this back to grayscale if you want to get a little bit better preview. We're going to bring our fuzziness down. I didn't want to select so many highlights. That's perfect. All these little squares and stuff you see, that's compression. That's just because we're working on a JPEG. If this were a 16-bit raw image, like if it was your own photograph you shot for the digital camera, and you were shooting in RAW, you wouldn't see this stuff. So when we talk about JPEG compression, you can actually see it right there. Not a big deal unless you go super like heavy editing, but I do always recommend shooting in RAW whenever possible. But I didn't take this picture, it's a stock photo. So anyway, back to our select color range. We got the highlight selected. It was selecting a little bit too much before, meaning it was gonna hide too much, and we don't want that. So this is good, it's gonna hide less. Let's hit OK. Okay, and then image, down to apply image. Okay, so it literally takes a snapshot of everything you see, puts it on a new layer, and because we have a selection active, it's only going to do it within that selection. If you didn't have a selection active, it would just create a blank. It would create a completely filled, completely opaque layer. All right, let's hit OK there. And then Control-Command-D to deselect. So now, if I use my Move tool, you can see we have just highlights. Cool. I don't need all of this layer. Like if I create a black solid color fill under this layer, you can see like that's literally what's on this layer, right? I don't need all of that, right? At best, I need this area right here, okay? I can just take a look at where my, yeah, see that selection pretty much encompasses all of that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift-Command-I. Oh gosh, I hit the wrong thing. Adobe Creative Cloud was real happy that just then. Me? Shift-Command-I is going to inverse my selection, okay? So now instead of selecting just that little bottom part, so we'll do that again because I don't know if that was clear. So again, this is a reflection that we just copied on this layer. Don't need it everywhere, right? It's just taking up space in my computer. So just make a selection around where you actually do need it, and then inverse your selection. So Shift-Command-I will do that, or you can just go to Select and down to Inverse. Okay. Then I'm gonna hit Delete, just the Delete key, and then deselect by hitting Control-Command-D. And now, just the highlights in just the lake where just we need it. Okay. But we still don't need it all over the place, right? I just want it over top of my little particles here. So how do I do that? I use a clipping mask. So right-click on the layer. So this is lake highlights. Okay, and this is reflection, particle reflection. There we go, and we don't need that layer, and we don't need that layer. Okay, lake highlights and particle reflection. Now I want to clip the lake highlights on top of the particle reflection. Okay, so it's only visible there. So we're just going to right-click here and go to Create Clipping Mask. Bang. Okay, and now it's only going to be visible where my particles are visible. I'm getting some weirdness there. I think that just has to do with compression. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know, but we'll just mask it out because, hey, why would we not just mask that out? There we go. Mask out the weird areas that don't work, that I don't have an explanation for why that did that. I'm sure there is a good one, but I just don't know what it is. All right, now if we make those both invisible, oh, it was just the hard edges of the original reflection. Cool. So did we need to mask that out? Yeah, I mean, it definitely looks better if it does. This layer also, by the way, right? This is just the highlights. This should not make anything darker, right? No way. It should only make things lighter. So we're just going to go from normal and then to lighten. Okay. Okay. And then it actually does have some hard edges because of the compression that we chose. So this might help that area. We'll see. But this layer itself, we're going to give it a blur. Okay. So let's go to Filter, Blur. I'm going to go to Motion Blur, just right and left. Okay, because that's kind of the way the water goes. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Um, any Rick and Morty fans out there? Anyway, perfect. And that's the way it goes. Anyway, and we'll just kind of bring it back a little bit over here. This, by the way, is pretty cool because now what we have is the highlights of the lake over top of the particles that we created, which is going to make a lot more realistic effect because there's a term for this. I don't know the exact term. Don't quote me on this term because I don't know it, so I'm not even going to say. But basically, a surface like water, the farther it is from you, it actually gets more reflective as you change the viewing angle, and closer towards you, it's less reflective. Like here, I'll just pull up a picture of a mountain lake. Here we go. Let's just do an image, Google image search for this, and we'll see if I can not sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. Here we go. Mountain lake right here for you to look at with your viewing pleasure. Okay. You see on this mountain lake how way far away, see it's super reflective. Basically, we're just seeing mountains, but as it gets closer to you, you can start seeing through it. The water is not becoming more transparent as it gets closer to you. It's just how it's a physical property of how light works, that as you change your viewing angle to reflective surfaces, they become less reflective. So that's just how real world reflections work. So if you ever create a reflection on water and you're like, why doesn't it look real? Make sure it's more reflective as it goes away and less reflective as it gets closer. And you can look that up. I think I don't know what it's called. It could be caustics. Could be I don't remember what it's called. There's a term for it. Anyway, we just did that. More reflective as it's further away, less reflective as it's closer. So pretty cool. And then on this layer, basically I just want to change this from normal down to multiply because I don't want it making anything lighter. And then I want to add a little bit more, there we go. Looks like we need to do a little more smudging. Now that I put my multiply on there. Let's just put this on darken because I don't want it to, there we go. See how multiply was making it like even darker than some of the areas of the actual reflection? We don't want that. So just see multiply to darken. Hey, there we go. Looking good. And then we can just smudge a little bit more. And then, yeah, let's just use a little bit larger of a smudge brush. There we go. Because I just don't think there should be that much definition in these particles because they're not very big. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to put a layer mask on this, and then just with a regular soft edge brush now, create a large soft edge brush, and then paint away at like 20% here with black to further show that reflective property. Okay, maybe not so much. Okay, looking pretty good. Now I'm gonna just try duplicating this layer, Controller Command J, so it's like more visible because the original reflection is actually like pretty visible, right? So this should help with that. All right, so if you want a layer to be like stronger, more visible, just duplicate it. And then I can just take the opacity of this one down there. So then you just group all those, Controller Command G, double click on that, call it reflection, and you got a reflection. You got yourself, hey, you got yourself a reflection. That is interacting with the water. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Let me just delete this one. I think we need a little bit more of a smudge on this, to be honest. So, my strength is set to 100. Sample all layers is not checked. All right, there we go. So it's just all this. It was just too clear. It was just too good. There we go. That looks much better. And I do want to duplicate it. The reason I do is because it should have a little bit more of a hard edge to it. Let me just undo it. I might have just smudged it too much. That's the problem with the smudge tool, is you can wind up with stuff that just looks like a blurry mess. In general, you don't want that. Alright. So I just hit undo a bunch of times, and I think we're back to a good one. Alright, I'm going to just create a new layer and literally just grab this color, and wherever we have a little bit of a blurry mess, I was just going to make some selections there. Just going to kind of add to this to cover up the blurry mess that we have. It's just kind of a factor of the smudge tool. Honestly, I wish it wasn't. But it is. And that's life. So, you know, just giving a little bit more of this. Painting in, trying to look more like the original reflection here. A little bit. Give it a little bit less of a blurry mess syndrome. Alright. Does that help? It kind of looks horrible. We'll blur it. Ha! Gaussian blur, that fixes it all. If it's a blurry mess, and then you paint it in as not too visible, then blur it a little bit. Okay. Finding our level of blur. That looks pretty good. As you can see, not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I think we've done a pretty good job at it. So there we have our reflection in the water, and I think it looks pretty good. I am going to clone stamp a little bit more. Not with that brush, just with a regular brush. Just clone stamp a little bit more. I know. It's like, when are you just done with this, Aaron? I realize it takes a little while. But hey, we want it to be good, right? No point in doing something if we're not going to do it well. All right. Cool. There we go. I think that actually did help out a decent bit. All right. Fantastic. So there's our reflection. That's how we do it. As you can see, it's not very straightforward. There's a lot of things that we need to take into account, but I think this looks really good. Alrighty, we are almost done with our entire process. We got one more section for you, and we're just going to kind of be blending everything together. It's actually going to be pretty quick. We're just going to do a little bit of like light and color balancing, and just apply a little vignette and things like that. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next section. Bye, everyone. And I'm just going to do this all in the same recording. All right, there we go.